This is your CEO assessment tip. Today we're looking at how do we know if your CEO candidate can manage a team. Managing, much different than leading. When we're talking about managing, we're talking about the CEO's ability to set and meet organizational objectives and make sure the team is operating in peak performance. So when we start the interview, I like to start with some soft questions so it looks like I'm just making some casual banter, but in fact, I'm not. So a simple question I might ask candidates, say, oh, I saw you went to Penn State, great school. Why did you choose Penn State? What went into that decision-making process? Very innocent question, but what I'm really looking at here now in the way that the candidate answers a question is, how does that individual set goals? And once they set goals, what infrastructure do you create around your goal? So an average candidate might apply to 10, 15, 20, 30, maybe probably not more than 30 schools because that's a lot of work, but they'll apply to a bunch of schools, they'll see what sticks, and then they'll end up picking whatever from the selection they got into, they'll just pick whatever the best option was for them. This is called a spaghetti offense. Throw the spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks. The high performance candidate will be very specific that, hey, I know that Penn State has the largest alumni network in the world. I wanted to have my undergrad in a school with a big alumni, so I chose to go to Penn State. I wanted to go to a big school. So whatever the reasoning is, it doesn't matter. That they have a clear reason of where they want to go, why they want to go there, and then they will meticulously knock off what are the admission requirements. And then they will build infrastructure around their goal. They might even get an admission consultant who specializes in getting people into Penn State. They will make study groups. They will start creating their volunteer programs. Everything they do will start to go around this goal, and they'll have a robust infrastructure which includes other people that are included and drawn into their goal. They're going to get people to rally around them to support them in the achievement of their goal. So this is what I want to look at. And then the concept here is if you cannot set goals and achieve medium and long-term goals in your personal life, you will not be able to set medium and long-term goals in a group setting or as an environment, and definitely not as a CEO. And that's one of the core things we look at is, can your CEO manage a team? Well, the first part we want to look at is, can they set and achieve goals in a group setting? So what other questions can we start to look at here in this area? I start to then ask some very simple above the belt questions, which are, what was your revenue targets and actuals for the last 3 years? So 2018, and I also like to move away from the annual number because the CFO or the annual report, they will really push that annual number. But I want to know, and I want to dig into, has the CEO really been setting weekly, monthly goals, quarterly goals with the team, working with the team to really achieve or exceed targets? And so then I'll start to dig into what was your quarter two actuals versus projected for 2018. What was your Q3 2019 results? I was going a few years back. The CEO, then the person who's an average performer, will try to remember, be looking at those, what was on that PowerPoint, what was in that annual report that we sent to the board, and they'll start to remember it. A CEO who is really focused on achieving goals in a group environment, they would have set the target, they would have worked on marketing, branding, business plans, L&D programs. They would have had so much stuff that they would have been doing around trying to achieve those targets that when they remember it, they're gonna have an emotional response. That's what I wanna see. Do they have that emotional response? Oh yeah, 2018, this is what we were doing. That was a tough one. And and then they start to go into the great detail about what went into the setting of that target, and did they overshoot the target, undershoot the target, or come in on point. And this is one of the differentiators that you're gonna see between the top performers and average performers. The next piece that I also wanna look at when you do this is be very wary if the CEO is saying that that their projection and their actuals match year on year, quarter on quarter. that's a big red flag that either the CEO doesn't have the courage to be candid about their shortcomings, that if they are dishonest, that's an issue right there to disqualify, or they don't have a realistic self-image. They're not able to say, yeah, in 2018, I really dropped the ball. We were really focused on our back office instead of, having the right XYZ issues, whatever the issues are. There's a million issues why you can miss a target. But do they have the courage and the realistic self-image to sit back and say, hey, this is why I missed it. This is where the gap was. And these are what our numbers were. That's just touching on how do you set goals, medium and long-term goals in a group setting. The other piece I like to look at when we're looking at managing and setting medium and long-term goals is the CEO's ability to set 5-year plus long-term milestones and objectives for the team. So I might ask a simple question: what will your business look like in 2026 from a revenue perspective, from a staffing perspective, geographically, product-wise, et cetera, and let them walk me through the key milestones that they plan on passing through and what are the capabilities they need to develop as an organization to be successful, to be competitive over the next 5 years. And then as they start answering, I will start stress testing those points. So if they say, for example, in the next 2 years, I'm going to double our top line revenue, I'll say, okay, what's your current revenue growth rate? And I will use the rule of 70 on the fly for a back of the envelope calculation to understand what that revenue growth rate needs to be. So the rule of 70, if you don't know, means that what you take the number of years that you want to double in and you divide 70 by that number, and it gives you your percentage growth rate. So if the person says, I'm going to double in 2 years, you take 70, you divide it by 2, the number of years, and that gives you, 35, and then you round that up to 40. So now I know that you need 40%, around a 40% revenue growth rate if you're going to double your revenue in 2 years. So I might ask, what's your current growth rate, revenue growth rate? And he says 15 or 18%. Now I know that the CEO is not on the ball, not on their numbers. Or they might say, oh, in 3 years I'm going to open 15 hotels, and then I know that you probably need a staff of 2 people per hotel room. And so all of a sudden we quickly can guess that this CEO needs to hire 3,000 or 2,000 people over the next 6 months or whatever the period is, and they don't know that. They don't know these answers. They don't have the grit of the detail. Then we know that this is probably a bogus 5-year forecast that they're trying to pass over in the interview. A lot of the CEOs are tactical. They're phenomenal firefighters, tactical hands-on operators that can deliver results monthly and quarterly, and their horizon is 12 months at most, and a lot of them will just admit that in the interview. Say, look, I don't really operate on a 5-year plan. I operate on a 3-year plan. And then I do the same thing, dig into that 3-year plan. What are you trying to achieve during the 3 years? And then what are the underlying details that need to buttress that up if you're going to achieve it? And then I might also work in reverse. So 2015, what was your plan? Was it out to 2018? Was it out to 2020? Let's walk through those previous 3-year plans that you made. What were the assumptions? How close were your projections to your actuals? And where there were gaps, why were there gaps? Where were your assumptions wrong? What would you do differently if you had to do that 3-year or 5-year or 10-year plan again? This is a really critical skill for the CEO, and it goes back to management, because if your CEO doesn't have a long-term plan, you can't have effective career management or performance management for the team. That dialogue where the CEO will tell his direct reports, hey, follow me, and this is what you'll look like in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years or 10 years. This is what your career will look like. They're not having that discussion because they don't have a 5-year plan. They don't have a 10-year plan. So your performance management suffers, your career management suffers, your career pathing suffers. That's a major issue. The next major issue that comes from this is that your succession planning goes out the window, because if you don't have a 5-year or 10-year plan, then obviously your CEO is not saying, okay, who and what capabilities do we need that person to have? Who's going to lead us 10 years from now? What are the capabilities that they need to lead us? Who's going to lead us 5 years from now? And what are the capabilities we need to be developing in order to be ready for these changes? They're not having that discussion. So your succession planning goes out the window, and you see this all the time. 50-year-old companies, 60-year-old companies, 80-year-old companies, they don't have a successor for the CEO. They don't have a successor for their key business heads, for their key business lines. Why is the executive bench so thin? that you only are one person deep and the company has been around for that long. That should never happen. But this is because the CEO is not taking a long-term view. They're not addressing the key issues that are going to create a sustainable business. And we want to avoid these CEOs. And finally, this type of thinking puts the whole organization at risk. If we're not, the CEO's job should be asking, who are we going to be competing against 5 years from now? Where are we going to be competing? What are we going to be competing with? What geographies are we competing in? And so that 5 and 10 year plan is really mission critical if we're going to have any sustainability as an organization. So based on these factors, I would disqualify your CEO candidate if they can't answer these questions. That is your CEO assessment tip for the week. Those are a few questions you can use to catch a CEO off balance. If you like those, you could pick up our book, CEO Assessment and Selection, which has over 400 questions that you can use in your CEO interviews. Also, on our book page, you can download a free sample of the book, and you can get a link to our book page in the description of this video.